about Dr. George M. Lamsa, as he is responsible, of course, uh, for everything we do here. Um, and we talk about him being so uniquely qualified because of his background. He spoke Aramaic, that was his native tongue, and the culture and everything. And we always talk about that a little bit, but we'll talk a little bit more about some of the cultural things tonight. But in addition, I thought we could get to know him a little better spiritually, because he was truly spiritually driven since he was a child. And so uh, I just thought, like when you study literature, you study the person who wrote it. So I thought we would just go in detail tonight and celebrate Memorial Day. Okay, so now, like I just said, now Dr. Lamsa is responsible, for what we teach here at the Aramaic Bible Institute. Um, him and Dr. Rockaway Jericho are the two main people that have carried on these Aramaic teachings, from the Aramaic Bible. And so it's just kind of a little reminder here, you know, Dr. Lumsden led a life just like that of Jesus. He spoke Aramaic and he experienced, the ancient Semitic customs and culture from the time he was a child until he was an adult. And that's what we basically talk about. And that did make him very qualified to translate the Bible. But we're going to talk a little bit more about his spirituality and who he was, because he truly was guided by God throughout his life. And of course, the focus of the teachings from here at the Aramaic Bible Institute um, is the counsel and guidance by God, or some people call say spirit, whatever. And so he actually had many experiences in his life um, that helped him to understand the this this presence of God that we teach and focus on, whether it's the Old Testament or the New Testament. Okay, so, and there's some interesting stories here. Not, I can't do all of them, but there's some interesting stories that will look at. Okay, now, Dr. Lamsa was of Assyrian heritage. And so I just have a paragraph here so that we can understand a little bit about um, what his background is compared to others. So Assyrians are an indigenous Middle Eastern ethnic group, primarily found in parts of northern Iraq, Syria, Turkey, and Iran. While they have lived in these areas for millennia, they are not citizens of any single nation. They are often described as a distinct ethno-religious group with their own language, which is Aramaic, and diverse religious affiliations, but mainly the Assyrians are and were Christian, but they were okay. Remember, we have Western Christianity and we have Eastern Christianity, which Eastern Christianity was first. That's where it came. So, um, so anyway, he, as an Assyrian, okay, he was unique in that aspect also. So because he didn't identify with any of these countries. Okay, now he grew up in the Kurdistan Mountains. Now, I don't have Kurdistan on here, but the mountains, I hope you can see my pointer, but right above where it says Marvishu, those are the Kurdistan Mountains. And that is where he grew up. But also notice, see, I have noticed the Tigris and Euphrates River, um, and that's where, and Iraq, whatever, that is really where the early Christians came from. Now, I know we have the things about Paul and our Western churches in Jerusalem, but actually, the very early Christians were here. Anyway, so that identifies him as an Assyrian. There are Assyrians all over the world now. There are many Assyrian communities in this country, in our country. Um, they're in California. There's several, I think, and in Michigan too, but they are in other areas. Okay, so we go to his birth story, and here's the thing. Only God knows the true beginning to the story of George M. Lamsa. Okay, basically, now you will see in some of the printed documents about Dr. Lamsa, they'll have a date, they'll have a date of birth, they'll have a year of birth, and but nobody really knew. Okay, and why don't we know his date of birth? Because remember, he was in a very remote area, so remote that when civilization, missionaries reached that area, which was about 1900, their first question was, are the Romans still in power? So, and that was the same, we've studied here in the Bible about um, time, and it's just of no essence to those people. And so, and they didn't read or write. Well, I don't say they didn't read or write. Yes, they did after, but they didn't keep statistics like we do. So nobody knows for sure his date of birth. And so, as we saw on the map, okay, he was from the town of Marbishu, and Marbishu was winter quarters for Lamsa's tribe. All right. Marbishu was also a tribe, and that was his tribe. And it was here that Sarah took her young son to the church for his official dedication to God. Now, she, not everyone did that, but this dedication to God, it has occurred in the Bible several times. Um, Samson was one. His mother dedicated him to God. Um, I think John the Baptist. In any event, his mother just knew in her heart that that he was destined um, to do something godlike, and so she she dedicated him to God. Now, we most recently studied, I think when we talked about the lamb, we talked about sacrifices, and we talked about the history of that. And so here it is. He actually, well, I mean, he was a baby, so but the family and the tradition was there. An ox was killed, the meat was cooked and given to the people, and some of the blood was placed on young Lamsa's forehead, thus fulfilling the vow his mother had made to dedicate him to God. So that is how that's how he began life. Uh, and just a little notes. There is so much, but just some notes. Okay, he was of the tribe of the Marbishu. Okay, these tribes were mostly sheep herders. Okay, and he had responsibilities for the sheep as he was growing up, and and when you read the Bible, there's so much in there about sheep, sheep, sheep. Well, that's why, because the he understood, as did the writers that told the stories in the Bible. He understood how sheep herding worked, and he knew the ins and outs of it, and it's reflected here in the Bible. I mean, not that he wrote it, but that was his heritage too. And seemingly he had two sisters, may have had more, but now, as we have talked about from the Old Testament on to today, um, the women in the Near East had no significance. They were treated poorly, badly, and Dr. Lamsa was very, I don't know the right word, but uh, he recognized the the fate of women, and he through he created an organization, a society of it was Christian Muslim society, where he tried to get people to understand each other, because the Muslims hated the Christians, period. And the Christians, it's hard to say, but in other words, they weren't angels either. So Dr. Lamsa was very close to his mother. Uh, he did have a father. He didn't, his father didn't pay him much attention. His father was always working out in the fields and all that kind of stuff, but he's very close to his mother. And so I put this story in here because sometimes, it makes a difference from the way, not necessarily the way he translated the Bible. He has written some other things, but anyway, the culture of the time was that women were treated like slaves and were forced to perform hard labor under any circumstance. Now, this was in early 1900s that this was happening, but it had happened in the old world pretty much the same way. And so I just wanted to put this quote in here because it affected him deeply. Now, there is an out of print book called The Secret of the Near East that he wrote in 1923. It's out of print, I don't know. But anyway, I just got this quote out of it because I think, I think it helps to understand. He says, I can never forget the loss of my own mother. Some of these poor women are forced to work at this hard labor when pregnant. Every day, someone came looking for women to work for them. One morning, when my mother was taking care of the little ones, she was taken to hard labor in spite of her pregnancy and ill condition. She came back sick and died on the same evening. Deeply, deeply, that situation about women deeply affected him. Uh, and the other thing, and he did mention it, um, they were actually living in a Christian town. And he did make the remark in the book that how much worse could this have been if it were in a Muslim town? So it was in that area that there was the Muslims and the Christians were clashing. Okay. Now, his education, um, he was found to be extremely bright when he started attending school at the age of 4. And then by the age of 9, I mean, he had truly excelled, knew all the scriptures, and was chosen to attend a school in Iran. Now, the school that he was to attend, um, interestingly enough, again, and this is culture, he was rejected by the school when he got there because years ago there had been a feud between his father and another family, which I guess there was someone in the school from that other family, and they were not going to let him stay. Uh, and again, that brings up the culture that idea of feuds and whatnot could carry on for years and could affect the children many generations later. And so, but what happened, and this is, I think it's important to know that throughout his life, God was there. Um, and we'll call it God or spirit, what was with him, though, I mean, I'm sure he didn't realize or talk about it at the time. But you see here, the situation of that school, all right, what happened was he was being sent home because they did not accept him. And what happened is there was another student there who didn't want to be there, was being forced by his parents. And somehow their names got exchanged, okay, mistakenly. And he got to stay. Um, and then he was rejected once again. But one of the teachers at the school stepped up and said, no, if you expel him, then I'm going to leave also. So that, I mean, I think, that kind of began the recognition of the spirituality or the presence of God in his life. So another incident that I thought we would just, um, and we've studied and learned about hospitality many times, but this was his own experience. Uh, he had been trying to get back from Iran back to his hometown. It was winter. It was freezing cold. And he hurt his foot. So I'm going to just start here. Later, Lamsa's foot started to pain him. After 2 days in the freezing mountains, it swelled to nearly twice its size, and he was helped into the nearest town. The mayor of the town took him into his house. The mayor was a Muslim. The mayor and his wife thought Lamsa was asleep, but he overheard them talking. The man was telling his wife that the boy was a guest in their house and they were responsible for his safety and well-being. Now, I know many of you have heard this before, and it still remains to this day that this tradition of hospitality stands. And even if it's your enemy, you're required to take in somebody that has a need or whatever. So, but here, the mayor was Muslim. The townspeople had started gathering at the door of the house, shouting for the mayor to turn the Christian over to them. The mayor and his wife came to Lamsa's bed and explained to him that years ago, and here we go again with that tradition, before Lamsa was born, 2 wedding parties met on the road to Lamsa's country. The Christian people were shouting and firing their guns into the air, and one of the bullets accidentally killed the Mohammedan bride in the other party. Now they were shouting for Lamsa's blood. They wanted to kill him for revenge. So that was going on way back even in the Old Testament. This was in the early 1900s, still going on over something that happened many years ago. But the Muslim people held it and wanted to do revenge. So spirituality. All right. Now he many times he had visions that kept him that kept him on his way, and he would as if we follow spirit, like like it's taught and everything, he just kept following his visions, paying attention to spirit. So in one of the instances, he had completed his education over there. He was he was a professor, whatever, but the war broke out over there, and he had this vision that helped him escape from that war-torn country. Now, the vision basically was to come to America, but he didn't have enough money to go to the US, so he just took the first ship that he could pay for, and he went to Buenos Aires. He went through lots of stuff there that is really significant, because people tried to do him in, and but always there was a whatever, money showed up, people showed up, and so then he was able to follow his vision to come to America. And there's lots of little stories on the way. But so he arrived in 1917, he arrived in America. And this is a cool story about his name, because up until that time, he was known as Lamsa, period. So the newcomer, he was in line. I probably Ellis Island, I'm not sure, but he was in line. Okay, and he heard a newcomer ahead of him ask what would happen if he had only one name. Well, you know, caused a little panic there. And the customs man told him that he could not be admitted with one name. So Lamsa's hopes were shattered. He only had one name. Lamsa was the only name he had ever been called. One of the names of the man in front of him in the customs line was George. So Lamsa hastily borrowed it, and for a frantic moment, he didn't know where to put it, in front or behind his true name. So, for fear of forgetting it in his fright, he said it first, put it first. Thus, he became George Lamsa. And then he added the M as his middle initial for his Mamishu tribe back in Turkey. Now you gotta remember it's that Turkey, Iran, Iraq, Kurdistan mountains are all in that area, and um they had to move around a lot and from one country to another. But anyway, that's how he got his name. All right. So when he got to this country, uh, he had contacted because the schools that he went to in Iran or they were mostly in Iran or Turkey. Okay, they were Anglican, and so there were Anglican bishops and whatnot everywhere, and in this country. So in any event, he contacted a bishop, one of those bishops here, and he got a scholarship to Virginia Theological Seminary. Okay, he studied there for 3 years, during which time he translated many letters for the War Department as well as for private agencies. The money he was paid for these services helped to maintain him in school. So he graduated from Virginia Theological Seminary. Oh, I'm sorry. Seminary, sorry, slip. In 1929, he entered the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School. And okay, and this is where the president and faculty were fascinated by Lamsa's claim that Greek was not the language of the original scriptures. And so he didn't stay there very long, but one of the professors and whatnot said, well, if you want to make this claim, you've got to start writing. You've got to put something in writing. And so his stay there was short, but it started him on his career as a Bible translator. So there was an urgency in him that compelled him to work from early morning until late at night, sometimes 18 or 19 hours a day, eating bread, cheese, and grapes in his room, as he used to do in his own country. He would eat and translate at the same time. It seemed to Lamsa that a day would be gone in only a few hours, and a week would pass like a day. His mind was constantly on his translation and books. He thought of nothing but the wonderful hidden truths he was extracting from the original Peshitta and would someday present to the world. He was driven by the knowledge that the Aramaic text had been hidden from the world for nearly 2,000 years. Now, let's talk about that. So, okay, we had Bibles, we had Bibles, before 1900 and all that kind of stuff. But we have to go back to history again. And we go back to uh, Constantine, okay? And Constantine, look, there had been debate after debate over, particularly the one particular thing was whether Jesus was God, uh, and and various just various other things, and of course when Constantine got a hold of it, then he began mandating what the Bible would be and whatnot. But and he also he destroyed many of the early Christian Bibles that were there, in Jerusalem and whatnot. But he didn't know about these people in the Kurdistan mountains, like Dr. Lamsa, and they had taken their Bibles, whatnot, with them when they went into whatever you want to call it. Um, and so that's why no one ever knew, and it never appeared until 2,000 years later. Okay. And so just to talk about his visions, um, and I, of course, we we have so much today with psychics and voyages, and it gets all mixed up. But uh, he had these visions, and in my mind, it's the presence of God. The visions, you know, that's where they came from. But just some interesting. These are his later visions once he was in this country. Um, One night in 1936, he had a vision that on the following day he would have an automobile accident with the minister with whom he was staying. In the vision, the car was burning, but neither he nor his friend was hurt. Lamsa related this vision to his friend, who laughed at the idea. The accident occurred just as Lamsa had seen it. The car hit a mound of loose gravel at the side of the road, turned over, and burned, but without injury to either of them. Okay, and he had one more vision like this. Um, Again in 1937, just 3 miles outside of Philadelphia, Lamsa was riding in a car with two others when he suddenly had a feeling of danger. He asked to be let out of the car and told his friends that he felt there was danger ahead. They tried to reassure him. Lamsa insisted, however, and they finally agreed to let him out at the train station and push on towards Chicago, where he was to meet them. Later, while going through the mountains, the car in which his two friends were riding plunged over the side of a mountain. Witnesses stated that the car flipped many times before it came to rest at the bottom of a ravine far below the road. Neither of the men was injured. So Dr. Lamsa was connected. There's no question about it. And he, I think you can say he translated the Bible in the presence of God. So throughout his years of translating, God sent him friends who supported him and his cause. Uh, Now, it took him, well, wait, I'll tell you that later. They provided lodging and food along with the money he needed to publish his work. So he was truly a man of God. and that is reflected in many of his writings. And wait, I thought I had something else. Let me see. Okay, when we talk about these friends, Dr. Lumsden, he never had to look for an apartment, or he never, people just kept coming to him, and that's how he uh, that's how he did his translating. Okay, here, this is what I was thinking. All right, so he began his work probably about 1930. Okay, so he completed the four Gospels in 1933. And then they encouraged him to do the New Testament, completed the New Testament in 1940. And he completed the Old Testament, and the entire Bible came out in 1957. So probably from 1930 to 1957, I don't know how many years that is, 23 years, whatever. And anyway, that's how he was supported. People, and very wealthy people just kept coming to him and saying, well, you could come to my house and we'll, and that's what he did. Okay. So I put a list of, all right, he in addition to the Bible, okay, he did books. These are single books of his own. And I won't necessarily go through them, but these are all current and these are all available. Yeah, all of these here are available, ebook or paper. Okay, and of course, Dr. Lamsa originally wrote the commentaries. He wrote one big thick commentary on the Old Testament, one on the Gospels, and one on New Testament. And so what happened is when Dr. Lamsa passed, that was in 1975, Dr. Rocco Errico, he was authorized by Dr. Lamsa to expand upon what Dr. Lamsa had put in his Old Testament and New Testament commentaries. And so we also have, and these are authored by both Dr. Lamsa and Dr. Errico, and there are 13 of them. And of course, we use those almost exclusively, but not quite. So, all right. And to wrap this up, we got this. So I thought I would just wrap it up with this. This was Dr. Lamsa's favorite scripture, and it's Psalm 119, 105. Thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And I will just say that this led to a comment by Dr. Lamsa that said he believes that every episode in the Bible has a meaning for mankind, even today, but you must understand the culture and the tradition behind it. Okay, that's the end.